Welcome back to 101 East. Beijing's Olympics is China's time to shine on the world stage, and its citizens are proud to be part of the event. We meet one young Chinese who can't wait to be part of it. Here's his story in his own words.
I'm Igor Wen, and I'm 30 years old, and I'm living in Hong Kong. I think I share the same reason to be a volunteer in Olympic with any other volunteer, because this is the first time that China to organize its own Olympics. This is a very good opportunity for China to demonstrate the modernization of our city, because we don't have many chances to show the world that we are so well developed, and we are so intelligent, and we are so nice to all people. I think the media has focused on some negative angle of Chinese. It hurts me a lot. They have ignored the positive angles of the event. I do respect the rights of expression, but if someone uses the violent way to express the view, for example, to obstruct the torch relay, I don't agree with them. Because Olympic Games encourage peace, harmony, and fair play spirit. So they are coming against the Olympic spirit. So I oppose strongly. I don't agree with Tibet to be apart from China, because every people want the whole country united. We are in the progress of improving, but we are not enough. We have to learn from the different people. We have to adopt their advantages, but we have to keep our identity and tradition. This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience for me, and I want to be a part of China as it shines on the international stage.
On the show today are, in Hong Kong, Professor Barry Saltman from Hong Kong University, in Washington, Professor Kishore Mahbubani from National University of Singapore, and here in KL, Dr. Chandra Musafa from the University of Science, Malaysia. Kishore, let me come to you. That young man expressing some nationalism, and one of the interesting parts of these whole riots has been the strength of Chinese nationalist feeling coming in a pro-Beijing vein. What do you think of that, and is that a surprise to you?
Well, I mean, there are, frankly, when it comes to nationalism, there are always positive and negative dimensions. The positive dimension, of course, is that there's a very strong expression of pride and unity in China, which I think is very positive. At the same time, I think even the Chinese government is wary of allowing this nationalism to become too strongly anti-foreign in its tone and temper. And by the way, no one has mentioned this so far. It is a good sign that the Chinese government has now decided to begin talks again with the representatives of the Dalai Lama.
Well,
and that's a positive sign.
You say that, but I mean, they've only made that as a suggestion, and a lot of people are questioning their real intent here and their sincerity on this. Barry, let me put this to you. How well has Beijing handled the situation so far? Do they really know what they're doing on the PR front here?
On the PR front, they're rather weak, of course. They've always been weak with regard to the Tibet question. Actually, Chinese officials, particularly those who are posted overseas in the diplomatic corps, know rather little about Tibet, and they don't know much about how to maintain relations with the international media. But of course, they're having a rather difficult road to hoe, because the international media, by and large, has made up its mind a long time ago about the Tibet question. So for Chinese to be able to put forward their ideas about Tibet and its relationship with China is always rather hard.
Okay,
they're operating in an extremely constrained environment.
The foreign media may have made up its mind, but Beijing is not helping itself when it puts out comments, and I'll quote you one: "The Dalai Lama is a jackal in Buddhist monk's robe and an evil spirit with a human face and the heart of a beast." How is that going to help the dialogue?
Well, I agree with you, Timo, that statements like that don't help Beijing. And Barry is right. I don't think they've done a very good job as far as the public relations dimension is concerned. But on the other hand, the Chinese have a channel, And I know a lot of people have been watching CCTV in the last few weeks to get the Chinese point of view. And if you look at some of the programs which they've put out, they've been really quite effective. At the beginning, I think there was a sort of knee-jerk reaction to what was happening, but it has become a little more sober, a little more analytical over the last few weeks. And I hope the Chinese learn how to handle the international media through this episode.
Kishore, let's look forward a little bit. How is this going to play out, and what do you think the long-term ramifications will be?
Well, I think, I suspect that there's a lot of reconsideration going on in Europe. I think the French realize that they paid too heavy a political price for their grand gestures. And as you know, they sent special envoys to Beijing to calm the situation and so on and so forth. I hope, frankly, that as a result of this episode, the most positive outcome will be, number one, that the Europeans would practice quiet diplomacy to talk to China and Tibet rather than to make grand public gestures. And secondly, even though you were rather skeptical earlier on about the possibility of a renewed dialogue between China and the Dalai Lama group, I think the fundamental point to bear in mind is that the Chinese believe in autonomy for Tibet. The Dalai Lama is calling for autonomy of Tibet and not independence of Tibet. There is no fundamental contradiction here, but there is a lack of trust. And if you can re-establish some degree of trust between the two sides, then I think we're moving in the right direction.
Barry, is that likely to happen?
I think it's likely to happen, and I think it's likely to happen because there are 2 points that I think are separating the two sides at present. One is that the Dalai Lama does not want to say that Tibet is an inseparable part of China, and this is a precondition on which the Chinese government has insisted. On the other hand, the Dalai Lama is looking for a discussion, for negotiations in the future, which are about more than just the Dalai Lama's future. They want negotiations that concern all aspects of Tibet's relationship with China. And I think it's entirely possible that the two sides can yield on these 2 points and that negotiations can take place in the future.
What's the US's role in this? Because on a broader stage, the US has been making a lot of moves to try, not perhaps to isolate China, but marginalize or mitigate its growing strength.
Well, I think it is Washington more than Europe that wants to contain China. If you look at Washington's relationship with Japan, attempting to rearm Japan, its overtures to India, some of the moves it's making in Southeast Asia, it's China, which is right at the forefront of US politics in this region.
And how do you think all of this will play out?
Well, I think what Western governments have done, and this includes Washington, has alienated a lot of people in Southeast Asia. And a lot of them would now feel we would want to be on the side of China. Though I think they would also want to maintain their own independence, but the sympathy for China has, I think, gone up by a few notches because of this episode.
Kishore, your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I'm going to do something very dangerous here, Timo. I'm going to defend the Bush administration's record on China. Actually, I must say I'm very impressed that George W. Bush has been quite firm in his decision to attend the Beijing Olympics opening ceremony, and I think that's a very, very positive signal. Secondly, I do agree with Chandra when he said earlier that there are concerns in Washington, D.C. about the rise of China. I've been here talking about my new book, and I can feel the concerns about the rise of China. By and large, it is actually quite amazing that the relationship between the world's greatest power, United States, and the world's greatest emerging power, China, is relatively stable. Now, this is a result of many factors, but let's hope that it remains relatively stable.
A final quick word from you, Barry, on this, the relationship between Washington and China, and within the light of this Olympic movement, will they boycott it, and will it make much difference to the relations?
I don't think that there'll be a boycott on the part of Washington, at least. And even if there were a boycott, I doubt it would make much difference. Actually, people pay attention a great deal to what Western leaders do in this regard, but one should also pay attention to what the leaders of developing countries are doing. And by and large, leaders of developing countries have already indicated their solid support for China around this question. So that even if there were a few Western leaders who decided to not attend the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, it probably would not make a huge difference certainly not make a huge difference in the eyes of the Chinese people, but by and large would not make a huge difference in the eyes of people in the majority of countries in the world.
And there we will have to leave it. Gentlemen, thank you all very much indeed for being with us today. That's all we have time for on this 101 East. My thanks to our guests, Professor Barry Saltman in Hong Kong, Professor Kishore Mahbubani in Washington, and Dr. Chandra Musafa here in KL. And from all of us here at 101 East, it's goodbye for now.